Hello everyone, let's continue our discussion on strategic management. So I'm using the text of Fred R. David, okay, the strategic management book by Fred R. David. All right, let's have a short recap. So we discussed already the external and internal audit, okay, otherwise known as your PESTEL or environmental analysis, I should say, okay, otherwise known as the environmental analysis. And when we speak of your external environment, we're talking about the PESTEL model. Okay, so this is basically a framework that categorizes and analyzes an important set of external factors. What are these? We have your political, economic, social-cultural, technological, environment, and legal. Okay, so there you go. In your internal audit or internal analysis, on the other hand, we're talking about within the industry. Okay, so inside the firm, this includes the competitive advantage, which would be based on core competencies, resources, and capabilities. When we speak of your core competencies, these are unique strengths, okay, embedded deep within the firm that are critical, of course, to gain and sustain competitive advantage. And when we speak of resources, these could be, all right, any assets or asset that a firm can draw on when formulating and implementing strategy. So capabilities, on the other hand, talks about organizational and managerial skills necessary to orchestrate a diverse set of resources and deploy them strategically. So it also includes the activities, okay, within the organization. When we speak of activities, distinct and fine-grained business process that enable firms to add, okay, incremental value by transforming inputs into goods and services. So that is your internal environment. Okay, let's continue our discussion with our competitive analysis using the Porter's 5 forces model. Okay, so let's take a look at the 5 forces model of competition by Michael Porter. So we have here a rivalry among competing firms, potential development of substitute products, bargaining power of consumers, potential entry of new competitors, bargaining power of suppliers. So first, let's discuss rivalry among competing firms. So the strategies pursued by one firm can be successful only to the extent that they provide competitive advantage over the strategies pursued by rival firms. So the intensity of rivalry among competing firms tend to increase as the number of competitors increases. So as competitors become more equal in size and capabilities, as the demand for industry's products declines and as the price cutting becomes common. So rivalry among competing firms, okay, is usually the most powerful of the 5 forces. As rivalry among competing firm intensifies, okay, industry profits decline. In some cases, to the point wherein an industry becomes inherently unattractive. Okay, so when rival firms senses weakness, typically they will intensify both marketing and production efforts to capitalize on the opportunity. Okay, there you go. All right, so these are some of the conditions that causes or that cause rather high rivalry among competing firms. So we have here high number of competing firms, similar of firm competing, similar capability of firms competing. What else? Falling demand for the industry's product, falling product service price in the industry. So when consumers can switch brands easily there, okay, and so on and so forth. So these are some examples. Okay. All right, moving on. Another part of your Porter's five forces model would be your potential entry of new competitors. So whenever new firms can easily enter a particular industry, the intensity of competitiveness among firms increases. Therefore, it's the job of the strategists to identify potential new firms entering the market, to monitor the new rival firms' strategies, to counter-attack as needed, and to capitalize on existing strengths rather, and opportunities. So when the threat of new firms entering the market is strong, usually incumbent firms generally fortify their position and take actions to deter new entrants, okay, such as lowering prices, maybe extending warranties, what else, adding features or new features of the product, or maybe offering financial or financing specials. Okay. All right. The next one in the Porter's five forces model would be potential development of substitute products. So competitive pressures, okay, arising from substitute products increase as the relative price of substitute products declines and as consumers switch costs, okay, decrease. So the presence of substitute products puts ceiling on the price that can be charged before consumers will switch to the substitute product. So price ceilings equate to profit ceilings and more intense competition among rivals. So the competitive strength of substitute products is best measured by the inroads into market share, those products obtained, as well as those firm plans for increased capacity and market penetration. Right, so that is for your substitute product. All right, we also have here the bargaining power of suppliers. So basically competitive pressures arising from substitute products increase as the relative price of substitute products declines and as consumers switching cost, of course, decrease. So it is often in the best interest of both suppliers and producers to basically assist each other with reasonable prices, okay, improving quality development of new services, okay, or maybe just-in-time deliveries, what else, reduced inventory costs, thus enhancing long-term profitability for all concerned. Okay, so firms may actually pursue backward integration strategy, we'll discuss that later on, to gain control or maybe ownership of suppliers. So this strategy is especially effective when suppliers are unreliable or maybe too costly or not capable of meeting a firm's need or maybe very inconsistent. So firms can generally negotiate more favorably in terms of suppliers when backward integration is commonly used strategy among rival firms rather in an industry. So there you go. Okay. And then we also have here finally the bargaining power of consumers. So it says here that when customers are concentrated or large or buy in volume, their bargaining power represents a major force affecting the intensity of competition in the industry. So basically, rival firms may offer extended warranties or special services to gain customer loyalty whenever the bargaining power of consumer is of course substantial. So basically, the bargaining power of consumer or consumers, okay, would be higher when the products being purchased are perhaps standard or maybe undifferentiated. So when we say standard or undifferentiated, it's common, it's the same. The products are all the same, okay? When in this case, of course, consumers can negotiate selling price. What else? Warranty coverage or maybe accessory packages to a great extent. Okay, so there we have here the bargaining power of consumers. Okay, so that's your five forces model according to Michael Porter. All right, let's continue our discussion with the industry analysis. So your Porter's five forces model would be your competitive analysis. Now let's take a look at your industry analysis. So first we have here your external factor evaluation or your EFE matrix. So this matrix basically allows strategists to summarize and evaluate economic, social, cultural, demographic, environmental, political, governmental, legal, technological, and competitive information. So it's external, okay? So external environment. All right, so let's take a look at the steps in developing your EFE matrix. So why is EFE matrix important in your strategic planning? So this is very important because you can evaluate the external environment of the company. So let's take a look at the steps in developing your EFE matrix. So first, you have to list key external factors. Okay, so you have to list key external factors, okay, as identified in the external audit process. Remember, in your strategic management model or process, we have your external and internal audit. So external audit, you have to scan your external environment, which includes, of course, your economic, social, cultural, demographic, environmental, political, governmental, legal, technological, and the like. Okay, so list all your external factors. Okay, include a total of maybe 10 to 20 factors. Okay, including both opportunities and threats. There. So that could affect the firm and its industry. So list the opportunities first and then the threats. So positive muna and then threats. Okay, be as specific as possible using percentages, maybe ratios and comparative numbers whenever possible. Okay, so how will you do this? Remember the sayings of Edward Deming, in God we trust. Everyone else bring data. So meaning to say, you have to scan your environment. Perhaps, okay, you research from your environment. What could be the threats that your business might encounter and what are the opportunities, okay, that could be favorable for your business in the future. So this is an example of your external factors. So first, you list your opportunities and then threats. So this is an example of an EFE matrix for a local, okay, cinema complex. So we have there the opportunities, okay, and then we have also the threats. So if it's possible, you include maybe percentages as shown in this figure. All right, next is for you, the second step is for you now to assign factors, okay, or assign each factor rather a weight that ranges from 0, which means that this is not important, to 1.0, which means that this is very, very important, or this is very important. So the weight indicates the relative importance of the factor to being successful in the firm's industry. So opportunities often receive higher weights than threats, but threats can receive high weights if they are especially severe or maybe threatening. So appropriate weights can be determined by comparing successful with unsuccessful competitors or by discussing the factor and reaching a group consensus. Discussing with whom? In the business, perhaps you discuss with the employees or maybe the managers, okay, of the company. So the sum of all weights assigned to the factors rather must equal 1 or 1.0. All right, so this is an example. So first, you list all the external factors, opportunities, or threats, and then you assign weights. Okay, so 0.0 meaning it's not important, and then 1.0 it means that this is very important. Okay, so make sure that the sum of all weights assigned to factors must be equal to 1. Okay, as shown in this figure. All right, the third step is that you have to assign a rating between, all right, 1 and 4 to each key external factors to indicate how effectively the firm's current strategies respond to the factors, where 4, okay, the response is superior. 3, it means that the response is above average, and then 2, the response is average, and finally 1, it means that the response is poor. So ratings are based on effectiveness of firms' strategies. Okay, remember, so your ratings would be based on the firm's strategies. So ratings are thus, okay, remember this, company-based, whereas the weights in step 2 are industry-based. Remember, your number 2 here is that for you to assign weights, okay? 0.0 meaning it's not important, and then 1.0 it means that it is very important. So how will you assign weights? So you have to compare, all right, from the industry where the business belongs to. For example, if you have a restaurant, so it means that, okay, you have to compare it with the food industry, okay? And then for your step 3, you base your ratings, okay, within the company. So it is important to note that both threats and opportunities can actually receive, okay, a 1, 2, 3, or 4 rating. All right, so there you go. You have to assign weights. as your rating. Assign the rating of your external factors. Okay, again, 1 as being poor, response is poor. Okay, you are basing it on the response of the firms. Okay, how effective the firm's current strategies, okay, respond to the factors. So remember, your 4 rating would be superior. 3, it means it's above average. 2, the response is average. And of course, 1, it means that the response is poor. Okay, so remember that the ratings are company-based, but in your step 2, it is industry-based. Okay, there you go. So when you're done rating your external factors, okay, you have now to multiply the weight and the rating, okay, to get your weighted score, right? And then after that, there, you total it to get the total of your, there, the sum weighted score for each variable, okay, to determine the total weighted score for the organization. So regardless of the number of key opportunities and threats included in your EFE matrix, okay, the highest possible weighted score for an organization is, okay, 4.0. Okay, there you go. All right, so that's it for your EFE matrix. Basically, we're talking about the external factor evaluation. Now, let's proceed, okay, to the next one. Your competitive profile matrix, or your CPM. So what is CPM? Competitive profile matrix, okay, identifies a firm's major competitors and its particular strengths and weaknesses in relation to a sample firm's strategic position. So the weights and total weighted score in both a CPM and EFE have the same meaning. Okay. All right. So the critical success factor in a CPM include both internal and external issues. Therefore, the ratings refer to strengths and weaknesses. Okay, where 4 would be your major strength, 3 would be your minor, and 2 would be your minor weakness, and then 1 would be your minor or major rather weakness. All right, so the critical success factor in CPM are not grouped in opportunities and threats as they are in an EFE. In a CPM, the ratings and total weighted scores for the rival firms can be compared to the sample firm. Okay, so you base it on a competitor. So this comparative analysis provides important internal strategic information. Okay, so let's take a look at an example. So in this example, the 2 most important factors to being successful, okay, in the industry are advertising and global expansion. So as indicated by weights of 0.20. So if there were no weight column in this analysis, note that each factor then would be equally important. Thus, having a weight column makes for the most robust analysis because it enables the analyst to assign higher and lower number to capture perceived or actual levels of importance. Okay. Note that in company 1, the strongest is a product quality as indicated by rating of 4, whereas company 2, the strongest, okay, is advertising. So overall, company 1 is the strongest as indicated by the total weighted weighted score rather of 3.15. Okay, so they're company 1. So it's more of like you are going to compare, okay, with other companies. So, all right. So another competitive profile is provided in this table. Okay. Note that company 2 has the best product quality and management experience. Okay, company 3 has the best market share and inventory system, and company 1 has the best price as indicated by the ratings. Okay, so there you go. Avoid assigning duplicate ratings on any row, okay, in a CPM. Okay, all right. So that is your CPM. All right, now let's take a look at your IFE matrix or your internal factor evaluation. So this strategy formulation tool summarizes and evaluates the major strengths and weaknesses in the functional areas of the business. Okay, so this is for the functional area of the business. How is this different from your CPM? So in your CPM, it basically identifies firms' major competitors. Okay, so you compare it with your major competitors in terms of the strengths and weaknesses. Okay, in relation to your own firm's strategic position rather. Okay, whereas in your IFE or internal factor evaluation, all right, you evaluate the major strengths and weaknesses in the functional area of your business. So your IFE factors evaluation matrix also provides a basis for identifying and evaluating relationships, okay, among those areas. What areas are we talking about? The functional areas of the business. Okay, so intuitive judgments are required in developing an IFE matrix. So the appearance of a scientific approach should not be interpreted to mean this is an all-powerful technique. Okay, a thorough understanding of the factors included is more important than the actual members. Remember that. So similar to the EFE matrix and competitive profile matrix, an EFE matrix can be developed in 5 steps. So let's take a look at the steps in developing your IFE. So first, you have to list key internal factors, okay, as identified in your internal audit process. So use a tool of, okay, from 10 to 20 internal factors if you can, including both strengths and weaknesses. Okay, list strengths first and then weaknesses. Be specific as possible. So using percentages again, ratios, and maybe comparative numbers, okay, you can actually put or include all your weaknesses and strengths. Okay, so there you go. So this is an example. You have to list all your internal factors, your strengths, and your weaknesses. As much as possible, you can use, okay, percentages, ratios, okay, to prove that these are indeed your strengths and weaknesses. All right, the next step is that you assign weight that ranges from 0.0, meaning it's not important, to 1.0. It means that it is all important to each factor. So the weight assigned to a given factor indicates the relative importance of the factor to being successful in the firm's industry. So regardless of whether a key factor is an internal strength or weaknesses, each factor is considered to have the greatest effect, okay, on organizational performance. So it should be assigned the highest weights. The sum of all the weights must equal 1. All right, so there you go. You assign weights, okay, from 0.0 as not important to 1.0 as all important. Okay, remember that regardless whether, okay, it's an internal strength or maybe weakness, factors, okay, considered to have the greatest effect on organizational performance should be assigned the highest, okay, weights. All right, there you go. So next step is for you now to assign 1 to 4 rating to each factor to indicate whether the factor represents a major weakness or major weaknesses, okay, or maybe minor strength or major strength. All right. Okay, so 1, a minor weakness, 2, a minor strength, or 3 and 4 would be your major strength. Note that strengths must receive a 3 or 4 rating and weaknesses must receive a 1 or 2 rating. So ratings are thus company-based. Again, this is company-based, whereas the weights in step 2 are industry-based. Okay, so there you go. Remember that the weights here, the weights that you are going to put are industry-based, meaning to say you try now to compare, okay, the strengths and your weaknesses based on the industry. And your ratings is based on the company. It's company-based. All right? Okay, and then you have now to multiply each factor's weight by its rating to determine weighted score for each variable. So you multiply the weight multiplied by the rating to determine your weighted score. And then you multiply so after multiplying each weight by its rating and after determining the weighted score, okay, you have now to compute. There, you get the total of your weighted score. Remember your weight should always have a total of 1. And then you compute to get the weighted score or total weighted score of your internal factors. Okay, there you go. Okay, so this is a sample internal factor evaluation for a retail computer store. So we have here, okay, the most important factor to be successful in retail computer store business are revenue from repair or service in the store. Also, the most important is the location of the store. Also note that the store is doing best on average customer purchase amount, and in-store technical support. So the store is having major problems with its carpet, bathroom, paint, and checkout procedures. So the matrix contains substantial quantitative data rather than vague statement. Please take note of that. Okay. Rather than it would write excellent, something like that. They are quite specific. So overall, the store receives a 2.5 total weight score, which on 1 to 4 scale is exactly average or maybe halfway, indicating there is definitely room for improvement in store operations, strategies, policies, and procedures. Okay. So basically, the IFE matrix provides important information for strategy formulation. So for example, this retail computer store might want to hire another checkout person and repair its carpet paint. Okay, bathroom problems. Also, the store may want to increase advertising for its repair or maybe service, because that is really important, as it has a weight of 0.15 factor to being successful in the business. Okay, there you go. All right, so this ends our discussion for your IFE matrix, EFE matrix, and your CPN. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you in my next discussion.